Chapter 13. A Boat in Trouble. A frightening thought came to Pete, Pam, and their father. They were lost in the river fog. The boy whipped out his flashlight, but its beam could not penetrate the white mist which had settled in about them. Maybe the current will carry us far down the river, Pam worried. Mother won't know what happened to us. What worries me is that we may be run down by another boat, Mr. Hollister said. I'll shout, Pete offered, as his father kept on rowing. Ahoy, ahoy, he called hopefully. No one answered. Our only hope, Mr. Hollister said, is that when Mother sees the fog, she will realize what's happening and blow our horn. He had barely uttered these words when the Sweetie Pie's horn sounded in the distance. Thank goodness, Mr. Hollister sighed and rowed faster. All we have to do now is go toward that sound. But a few minutes later he added, that's not going to be easy, though. The horn kept blowing, but the sound seemed as far away as ever. I think we're going in the wrong direction, Dad, Pam warned. I guess you're right, her father agreed. He pulled stronger on his left oar. There, let's hope we're traveling directly toward the Sweetie Pie. He kept rowing, and the sound of the horn gradually grew stronger. We must be nearly there, Pete said gleefully, but 5 minutes later he cried, Dad, we're getting farther away from it again. Let Pete and me take the oars for a while, Pam said finally. You need a rest, Dad. Their father thought this would be a good idea, so he carefully changed seats with his son and daughter. Pete and Pam pulled evenly, and the boat sped across the foggy water. But they also had the same trouble their father had had, never seeming to get very close to the sound of the horn. Know what I think is happening? Pam exclaimed. What? Pete asked, perplexed. I think we're going in circles, just like hikers do when they're lost in the woods. That's probably the answer, her father agreed. Do you have a compass in your pocket, Pete? The boy said no. He had brought one from home, but had left it in his bunk. Suddenly the three were startled by a scraping sound on the bottom of the boat. We're grounded, Pete shouted, but we don't know where. I have an idea, Pam said. If we're on the same side of the river as those boys are, we can call to them. What for? Pete wanted to know. They're hikers, aren't they? Sure. Then they'll probably have a compass, maybe even one to spare. You're a whiz, sis, Pete said admiringly. Mr. Hollister chuckled. I think, Pete, that you and I are a couple of dodos for not figuring that out ourselves. They beached the boat and climbed onto the shore. It was exactly the same spot as where they had landed before. Pete and Pam shouted for the campers as loudly as they could. A few moments later came answering cries, which soon were followed by footsteps. Michael stepped forward, beaming a flashlight. Somebody lost? He asked. Upon recognizing the Hollisters, he added, We thought you'd gone. We went in a circle and came right back here, Pete grinned, and told how they had been confused by the fog. Have you a compass we could borrow? I sure have. Michael reached into his pocket. Here's one you may keep. It's old, but works very well. Has a luminous face, too. Pete took the compass and thanked the boy. Mr. Hollister picked up the oars and set off. As he rowed, Pete held the compass in the palm of his right hand. I've taken a bearing on the foghorn, he said, speaking like a true sailor. Due west from here. Pete guided his father expertly. Left oar, right oar, he called out whenever the rowboat was getting off course. We're pretty close to home now, the boy said happily 20 minutes later. It sounds as though we're right on top of the Sweetie Pie, Pam added, putting her hands over her ears. Just then there was a hard bump, which threw the children forward. "John, Pam, Pete!" Mrs. Hollister's anxious voice cried out from the deck of the cruiser. "Hello, Mother," Pam exclaimed. "We're back, safe and sound." They threw the rowboat's rope to her. She held it as they scrambled aboard. "Whew," Mr. Hollister exclaimed as they started hoisting the rowboat to the deck. "I thought we'd never make it, Elaine." Ricky, who was still up, listened wide-eyed at the story of their adventures. "Say, that's a neat compass," he commented. "I'm glad you were able to fix up that boy's ankle," Mrs. Hollister said. "We got a good clue to old Mo from Michael," Pete said. "They saw a strange old man who was hiding something." "Not Bobby," Mrs. Hollister exclaimed. "Maybe he's helping Bobby get a big fish," Pam said excitedly. "That reminds me," Mrs. Hollister said. "I have some news too. While you were gone, I was listening to the radio. The police report that Bobby has not been located yet." "Then we have to find that old man," Pam declared. "And that's not all," her mother went on. "According to the broadcast, Mrs. Reed has returned and is beside herself with worry about Bobby. She's begging everyone to hunt for her son." "If old Mo's got him, we'll just make him give him up," Ricky threatened. "You've forgotten, dear," said his mother, "that we had an idea old Mo might be Bobby's great-grandfather. Surely he'd send him home." "That's right," Ricky sighed. The mystery was too much for all of them, and Mrs. Hollister said that maybe after a good night's sleep they could figure things out better and find both Bobby and old Mo. When the sun came over the treetops on the shore of the Muskong River, the Hollisters made ready to continue their journey. The fog of the night before had been blown off by a stiff east wind, and everyone was eager to continue the search. They had breakfast, and then Pete helped his father pull up the anchor. As they traveled down the river, the wind became stronger. Sue and Holly were asked to stay inside. "It's too breezy on deck," their mother remarked. "Let's play house in the galley," Holly suggested, and the two little girls went off. The wind became so strong that it whipped up whitecaps and froth on the surface of the river. "Wow, this is a real blow," Pete exclaimed, as he watched his father work hard to keep the cruiser on a straight course. "I'd say it was near a hurricane," Mr. Hollister remarked, as he gazed at the gray sky, which was quickly obscuring the sun. The Sweetie Pie was being blown close to shore on their right, despite all his efforts to keep it in the channel. "It's a good thing there aren't any submerged rocks in this part of the river," he told Pete. "Yes, but look up ahead, Dad," his son warned. "The place is full of tall weeds." Mr. Hollister yanked on the wheel with all his might to avoid them, but the Sweetie Pie merely plowed ahead. "The wind's stronger than I am," he admitted, a worried look on his face. "But I don't dare stop." As he said this, a tremendous gust of wind sent the cruiser directly among the thick weeds. A few seconds later, the Sweetie Pie stopped moving, its engine racing. Mr. Hollister immediately reduced the speed of the motor. "We'll have to work out of this slowly," he told Pete. "How, Dad?" "By making our boat go backward and forward." "Like getting a car out of a snowdrift?" "Right." Mr. Hollister put the motor in reverse for a few seconds, then started it forward. The Sweetie Pie gained a few feet every time he did this. "We're gonna make it," Pete shouted, as the boat slowly crept through the clutching weeds. But suddenly the motor started to groan. Mr. Hollister looked tense as he worked the throttle. I think," he started to say, when the craft gave a little shudder and the motor stopped. "We've stalled," Pete cried. "Our propeller must be fouled up in the weeds," his father declared. "Now we are in trouble."